But again, these were prohibited. What we saw the expose in 2004 were just a small number of them. So here's a case example of torture, which is really degradation and humiliation. So let's go down that dungeon. They didn't kill anybody, but there was such a morbid aspect of it. They were taking pictures of people with dead people. And it always moves to the sexual. Simulated fellatio. And it always moves to ultimate dehumanization. People as dogs. Picture, I knew that no senior officer ever went down to that night shift in 3 months. It turns out that was a truth, because he would obviously be out of uniform. And there's a prisoner who was mentally ill, who covered himself with his feces every day. They had to roll him in dirt so he wouldn't stink. Chip Frederick complained about that. They said, we have no facilities for mental illness. He complained that some of the prisoners had tuberculosis. They said, we have no facilities. He complained that there were 50 children mixed with adults, and you know the consequence of that? They said, make do, it's war. So who is responsible for creating and maintaining these conditions? Chip Frederick got 8 years, dishonorable discharge, 8 years in prison. Lieutenant Rayner got 10 years. Lindy Egland, the woman with the dog leash that was handed to her by the officials, she got 3 years. Everybody on the night shift got 6 months to 10 years imprisonment. Not a single officer got a letter of reprimand. Should they have? Okay. Using dogs to induce fear. Secretary Rumsfeld had a menu of acceptable interrogation tactics at Guantanamo Bay, which General Miller at Guantanamo Bay brought to Abu Ghraib and gave them to General Karpinski and said, this is what you must do. And so use of dogs to induce fear, and you saw that. Nakedness of prisoners, 5 minutes, okay? Again, explicitly as a dehumanization tactic, making prisoners naked, extreme stress and fear imposed, sleep, food, sensory deprivation, culturally insensitive, inhumane tactics, concealing illegal practices from the Red Cross, in fact, at some point prohibiting Red Cross from even showing up, of abuses, suicides, and murders in all prisons in Iraq. Whatever happened in Abu Ghraib, what I discovered happened in many of prisons throughout Iraq, Cuba, and Afghanistan. The answer is military intelligence, CIA, civilian interrogators. In Tier 1A Abu Ghraib, it was the interrogation center run by military intelligence, but Cheney had his CIA interrogators, and there was a third group of civilian contract from Titan Corporation. They were in competition for actionable intelligence. Once the insurgency broke out, remember after Bush said, mission accomplished, suddenly our soldiers are being killed, and we needed actionable intelligence. Instead of working together, they were in competition. And all of the military, as I said, have been absolved by military justice. So very quickly, I don't know if we can hear this.
We have to work for the dark side.
We have to work to the dark side.
Spend time in the shadows, intelligence work. A lot of what needs to be done here will have to be done quietly, without any discussion. We can sources and methods that are available to our intelligence agencies.
This was 5 days after 9/11, before they even knew who the terrorists were. He's already setting up his secret renditions. So systemic failures. There have been 12 reports about what happened in Abu Ghraib. Every report says failures of leadership, lack of leadership, indifferent leadership, irresponsible leadership, conflicting leadership, no supervision, no oversight. Tijuana was, as I said, the interrogation center. The military police, they were encouraged to abuse the prisoners, to take the gloves off. They use the euphemisms like the mafia, take the gloves off, soften them up. And as I said, and they never had a senior officer go down to the night shift. There was zero abuses on the day shift. Why? Because it was surveillance and oversight. By not communicating standards, policy, and plans to soldiers, these leaders conveyed a tacit approval of abusive behavior toward prisoners. Another report said there's both institutional and personal responsibility at higher levels. Torture backfires when the victim returns to the general population sharing info on tactics used on him. Is angry, revengeful, and becomes more radicalized. When you have 1,000 prisoners, what they did, you go through the torture thing, and then when he goes back, he tells everybody else what they did. So that whatever they did is now useless, and also he gets radicalized and everybody else does. Secondly, when the victims have no actionable intelligence. The best evidence I have, talking to investigators there, is at best they had 2% of the whole population had any information. People were turning in, especially in Guantanamo, people were getting bounty for turning in people, the neighbors, enemies. But also in Abu Ghraib, whenever there was an explosion, they arrested all the men and boys around that explosion. So you go through this elaborate interrogation, torture, training sessions, and you get nothing. So the frustration is now building up, which leads to ever more of abuse. When victims are in prison for a long time, so the information they have is cold and irrelevant. In Guantanamo Bay, they have prisoners there since 9/11. And after a very short time, even if you had information about Al-Qaeda leadership insurgency, the information is now irrelevant. So here's Guantanamo Bay. Here's Guantanamo Bay. There have been at least 16 reported suicides by so-called detainees, and then they stopped reporting that. So we have no idea the level of, the extent of suicide. Things have to be pretty bad when you commit suicide. I'm almost finished. America's illegally justified use of torture has been a national disgrace at the international, and the international law respect for alleged cherished values of human dignity. Torture is a crime against humanity. And unfortunately, the American Psychological Association has been involved in this because many of the people giving advice to the torturers were psychologists. And psychology had a Penn's report, Psychologists Engaged in National Security, of which I've been a public critic, and I have a copy which we'll also put on closed reserve along with the other books. And essentially, it was a disgrace because the committee to evaluate the ethics of psychologists on the 10-person committee included 6 people from the Department of Defense, including 2 high-ranking military officers. So I'm embarrassed by my association. Thank you so much.